Welcome back to the Radio Horror show here on WCUW 91.3 FM. We're back with a brand new show and a returning guest who hasn't been on the show in about 5 years or so. He is a comic book artist, creator, writer, illustrator here in New England with a bunch of cool new stuff that he's going to come on the show to talk about, including like the Infernal Pact, which I just got done reading. And we're going to talk about his absolutely weird, twisted love of Satan and everything to do with it.
Yeah.
Joseph, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. So,
Cherry Blackbird and the Infernal Pact I've read, and the Electric Black, all new stuff that you've been putting out since the last time you came on the show. Phantom
yeah.
Starkiller.
So, what I have coming up currently, you've read Cherry Blackbird. That's been put out in the direct market, right? So, I think when we were talking last, I was developing it, right?
Maybe. Honestly, I don't remember what. I mean, you came on for your artwork mostly, and you had been doing some books, but you didn't have like the collection of stuff underneath your name like you do now.
Yeah, I've been very prolific. What happened was I made Infernal Pact about around 2014. No, that's way too early. I can't remember. It was made a while ago, but nobody would touch it, right? Like no publishers would pick it up, and it's a graphic novel. So what I'm doing with it is let me back up for a second. I am the co-publisher of Black Caravan with Rich Woodall. It's our company. Our umbrella company is Scout Comics, and this all blossomed out of our book, The Electric Black. So we are a horror and sci-fi imprint, but we've branched into the bizarre as well. So we're doing like some tripedelic stuff that basically not your mainstream comics, you know. I was a huge fan of Zap and Hate comics in the 90s, and so we've been seeing artists veering towards that, and I don't want to let those people fall by the wayside, because a lot of comic books, mainstream comic books, tend to fall into these like house styles. You know, it's very regulated looking things, and I am into art and artistic expression. So we're picking up some of these other stranger titles that aren't necessarily your run-of-the-mill comic books. So that's my initial spiel there. But then with my own books, so I did a book called Calamitous Black Devils. I think that's when we originally talked, Chris. I was working on that book. All right.
Yeah,
And then
yeah, that's what it was. The Calamities of the Black Devils was definitely one of them.
yeah, and then I made I made the Infernal Pact. Then I made a book called Horror Babylon, which I had to change the title of it to Cherry Blackbird because conventions wouldn't let me display my banner for Horror Babylon. So and then I couldn't sell these things, by the way. Infernal Pact and Cherry Blackbird were way too extreme for most publishers. And by that being said, I've seen crossed on store shelves. So I'm like, how is this getting out, but you won't pick out my thing? But eventually the president at Scout, his name is James Haig, he was like, listen, we think you're really talented. Just make something that's more age appropriate. make something that's like PG-13, not so R-rated. And that's what I did. I made Electric Black with Rich, and then we got picked up, and that was the most successful book that Scout had ever produced at that time. It was so successful, they gave us our own imprint, and we ended up launching a whole line of comic books under our name. And through that, Rich was just like, dude, re-release Cherry Blackbird and Infernal Pact. So I've re-released Cherry Blackbird. That's come to the direct market. It was one of the top-selling books that we had last year, and Infernal Pact is coming out this year.
The original printings of these are kind of like almost sacred, I guess, because they're from very independently, and now they're being published through a company.
Yeah, I mean, people that are in the know have gone back and tried to hunt down these early copies of Infernal Pact. And if you can find it, one of the 1 in 200 copies of Horror Babylon ash cans that were produced. Ben Bishop actually did a Horror Babylon cover that was out there in the market. There was like 100 of those. Yeah, I mean, those have become collector's items now. But this whole, so it's like a series that I've created, which is like a grindhouse, demonic, satanic series, and it's very tongue-in-cheek. It's self-aware, and just like the genre itself, it's exploitative and has some very over-the-top characters, but I think people will see character development and fall in love with the characters, and you might be heartbroken by the end of some of them, but at other points in time you'll feel like cheering for the bad guy type of thing. So
you seem to be in love with the bad guy, as a lot of your books got this very satanic feel to them. Cherry Black, and the Eternal Pact, the Infernal Pact just was filled with like the most downtrodden people making the stupidest decisions.
Well, the Infernal Pact is 3 meth heads that sell their soul jokingly to Satan to get drugs, right? And then they find themselves really cursed, and they get turned into werewolves and demonic witches, and then in Cherry Blackbird, she's sort of gifted fame and fortune, but she has a cutoff date. So yeah, I mean, it's a cautionary tale. At the same time, it's not like I'm like, yeah, go worship Satan. Like, Satan's a bad guy in the stories. So, I mean, I'm not like embracing devil worship. At the same time, if you read my stuff, you'll get an idea of the fact that, like, I think pretty much all of Christian belief and religion is kind of bullshit. And I have fun with it, because it's a mythology. It's just like any mythos that's out in the universe, Greek mythology or the Romans or anything like that. You can play in that universe. You can make up stuff that goes with it. And I was brought up in a very staunch Christian household, Pentecostal, where people spoke in tongues and, did all this very bizarre stuff. Even when I was a kid, I was like, this is crap, And so now that I'm an adult, and I'm probably the only Schmalke that thinks this is bullshit, the other Schmalkes really don't talk to me, I just decided to put a spin on it, make it part of my story. I think a lot of writers do that. They take what they know and they play on it.
Your sci-fi little space one with your kind of I want to call him like heroic Skeletor with a lightsaber.
Oh geez, Phantom Starkiller and Count Draco Knuckleduster. Yeah, so Peter Gorel is the creator of Phantom Starkiller. and he's got, if you buy any of his figures, he's got this little write-up on the back of it, and it's this story about, you know, this galactic assassin that goes around the universe and has a cryptocrystalline stone that he's after, and he runs a deathless army. It's a very epic sort of one paragraph story. So me and him had been working for a couple of years on doing card art for his toys. I had done one for two of his characters called Vice Admiral Acker and Supreme Ruler Thubian. And but Phantom Starkiller was his big figure, you know. And at the time he was like, yeah, I'm about to bring this to market and through Super 7, which has a whole huge toy store market. And he's like, would you do package art for me? So I said, yeah. And so we started working together on that. A couple of packages later, he and I were still working together, and we were offered the imprint for Black Caravan through Scout, which was going to be a horror and sci-fi line. And so at that time I approached Peter and I was like, listen, you've got a science fiction character that I want to make, and you have a bigger character. Do you have a story? And he said yes. So we started working together on what this story looked like. And Peter's really good at creating these moments where action takes place. You know, it's like the cantina in Star Wars, you know, it's like that whole Han Solo buildup. He's got stuff like that plotted out, but he needed somebody to help him sort of weed out like where the story is going to go. And we went back and forth on a couple of things. And originally Starkiller was definitely a villain, but I was like, nobody's going to give a shit about this guy if he's just a straight up like evil piece of crap. So I wanted him to be a roguish, you know, anti-hero or like a Punisher type, not necessarily a villain, but an anti-hero. And that's where we started with Phantom Starkiller, and that's the first issue is our development of that. And with Count Draco Knuckleduster, you get a continuing story with a real now sort of neutral based villain. And then in our third book, you're getting a very, very villainous character, and that is Vice Admiral Acker. So, and there are 4 issues in our initial run. So it's Phantom Starkiller, Count Draco Knuckleduster, Vice Admiral Acker, and then it's going to be finished by Absolute Ruler Thuban. So that's our sci-fi story.
And what's Vanity?
Okay, so Yuri is Hungarian himself. I am not fully aware of what his background is, but he's done a deep dive on the true life story of Elizabeth Bathory, who was a Hungarian countess accused of murdering over 600 children.
Fun times.
Yeah. So that story, it puts into perspective how she got to be the person she is. And I think it brings into question some of her crimes. Of course, you know, when you're dealing with crimes from the 1400s, there was no such thing as due process or anything like that. It was just kind of like you got accused of things. They could beat confessions out of you until you died, that kind of thing. So I'm not saying she didn't do these things. We're just not really sure. but we're telling a story about what the historical perspective of Elizabeth Bathory was, and it's in a way it's sympathetic. It's the creature that time made, but it fits our motif. And the artwork for the book is done by a Russian artist, Natalia. I will butcher her last name. It almost looks like it was drawn in the medieval era. So it's got a cool look to it, but all the covers are being drawn by me. I was fascinated by the book the first time I saw it. It feels very intimate, and it's like you're seeing something you're not supposed to see. And that attracted me to it. And again, we are trying to pick up artwork and content that the typical comic book publisher does not put out. And so that fit with us 100%.
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's definitely got a very eye-catching cover to it. When does that one come out?
So issue 1, I believe, is due in April. And then we have no books coming out in May. There was a paper shortage worldwide, so we're playing catch up. A lot of the books that were due out in June, January or February, we're kicked down the road, and so you will see books we were supposed to put out in May come out, or supposed to come out in April, will come out in May, and yada yada. But we'll be back on track with printing in June. In May, though, is Free Comic Book Day.
Oh, yes.
And we do have a free comic book coming out for Black Caravan, and it's called The Electric Black, Children of Cain, issue 0, which is written by me and Rich Woodall. It's a split story. The entire next run of The Electric Black, if you're not a fan or you don't know what The Electric Black is about, it's about a cursed antique shop that travels through time and space, delivering cursed objects to people it wants to corrupt or devour. And this Free Comic Book Day issue takes place 2 years into the storyline, and it launches the new series. So it's a great jumping on point for people. And just so everybody knows, me and Rich share the duties on writing and drawing the book. And the cover for it is drawn 50-50. It's a very cool project that I do with my partner. And so issue 0 is our Free Comic Book Day issue. Launches a new storyline, which continues this fall.
And Cherry Blackbird came back last year? There was a 2021 post I saw.
So Cherry Blackbird initially was put out 4 years ago just by me. So only like a couple hundred people probably ever saw that book.
Yeah.
But I put it out the direct market. It became one of our top selling books in 2021 through the direct market. Had a large fan base. The last issue came out in November, I believe.
Oh, so I have the copy I bought like years ago. That's one of the original printing copies.
You basically bought something that I just put out again.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
It was never put out as single issues.
Didn't think so.
I am not putting out a trade for it.
As of now, someone said to me that your Vlada Kickstarter and the comic book that your 2 tie-ins or whatever, they'll you're putting them out independently, but if someone picks them up and publishes them or whatever, those copies will become very hard to find because A, you'll have to cease printing them, but B, if it they market it correctly, you'll have a book on your hands that people will be like, oh, I have the old version that was like completely self-made, and now he's got a publisher with him. So
yeah, so I'm doing that now, right? I've got a Patreon book that I'm putting out first.
Yeah.
through the Patreon, but the end goal is that it will have a publisher, or I'll just publish it myself.
That's what I'm
Uh,
doing with the next comic book I have working on, which is going to be a short comic, but it's
I didn't think what I was doing was that racy or offensive, but I literally couldn't sell Infernal Pact or Cherry Blackbird to anybody to save my life. That being said, all I can tell you is this. When Cherry Blackbird came out again,
yeah,
nobody expected it to do well. It did awesome. So, yeah, don't let other people's hindrances on your creativity, trying to milk toast what you're doing down, stifle what it is you want to tell. Sometimes art is hard, and it's difficult. I'm never going to compare what I did to anything close to this, but if you look at what's been happening lately in social media with Art Spiegelman's mouse being restricted from libraries. Now, a library worth its salt will never pick up Cherry Blackbird because it's highly offensive for many different reasons.
The library that did that is preaching.
It's genuinely, it deals with a very serious subject matter in a unique way.
Yeah, but that library is not
a palatable way for kids to read about the Holocaust, which is a horrible topic. So the fact that schools are banning that or whatever is highly offensive. But that being said,
but they've already proven that those schools are not teaching about the Holocaust anyway. So that doesn't speak for the entire school system, though. That story got blown up like crazy, and then I went back and I looked into those schools. Those schools have been very. First of all, they're all the worst things about America. They're in some of the worst states in the country, and a lot of those schools have already stopped teaching about the Holocaust years ago. So it's like, okay, these same probably states are anti-abortion and stuff.
We have to look at them as you have to be hopeful though, because it's like they're still Americans. We are Americans as a whole. The others, whoever they happen to be, you want to reach out to them, right? You don't want their parents, their preachers, or whoever they are, to influence the next generation. The only way you can do that is by keeping your head high, trying to put out stuff, and letting them know that this is the truth, or that there is another option other than what's being shoved down your throat. So ignorance, as they say, is bliss. The Holocaust was a horrible thing that happened. History does repeat itself, so let's not repeat what happened. Burning books, it's a pretty bad thing. There are a type of people that do that.
Right.
So, but don't ever condemn our fellow states, because they're Americans too. It's better to reach out. We're not above them. They're just people.
Yeah, I'm after 2 years, I'm tired of trying to change people's opinions, and they're set in their ways about things involving politics or pandemics or whatever. You know what I mean? It's it's exhausting, and I don't have the time anymore. You know what I mean? I live with somebody who's a conservative Jewish Republican, if you can believe that, and he is awful a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, my whole family is completely adverse to everything that I do. I am related to them. They are a part of me. And so I've come to grips with that. And it's just, that's the American experience, unfortunately. it will probably flip in like 50 years, you know? You never know. That's all I'm saying.
What do you got coming up out
Oh, right.
besides what you already talked about real quick, because we're at time.
Yep. So, I I am trying a new project right now. As you said, I have this like immense uh, love affair with the devil. So I decided to do the most witchy book that I've ever done, and it is called 7 Years in Darkness. And it's about a group of children whose parents are part of a cult that can script their children to the School of Dark Arts for a total of 7 years, where they're in a setting devoid of the sun. And the first issue of it is now coming out on Patreon exclusively. The whole first year of it, I think, will be a Patreon exclusive until I have enough to put out a full graphic novel. And at which point I'll be marketing it around. But anybody that's a fan of my work, I am doing everything on my own. I am writing it, I am drawing it, I'm even coloring this whole thing from scratch. And it's got this really cool ambionic mood to it. It's heartfelt. It talks about a lot of the things that I grew up on. So I am using a lot of my own personal experience in this. And again, it's a Patreon exclusive book. To find it, I'll send Chris the Patreon page, because apparently Patreon, you can no longer search for me on there because it's an 18 plus page. So yeah, I've got plenty of backers right now. There are some high tier packages, and but to be a physical reward backer, which means you get a book, you have to be a quarterly participant. I update it regularly, multiple times a week. And not only will you get content on 7 Years in Darkness, but I work on several other books like We Don't Kill Spiders, which made a top 10 list of independent comic books for last year. Electric Black, which has been the firebrand for Scout Comics for several years now. So I give behind the scenes pages and scripts and stuff like that for all of that content. And I also do
Joseph. We're at time, unfortunately. So give away your social media to be found.
At Schmalke on Instagram, and Joseph Schmalke Storyteller on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming back on the show to talk a little bit about what you've been up to over the last few years and everything you got coming out soon.